Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternities, a top 10 canceled TV shows that I would bring back. This video is a Patreon requested video requested by patron Ricky. Ricky, thanks so much for your request. In this video, I will count down 10 shows that were canceled that if I had the power, I would bring back. Now, one thing I want to make clear about this list is that this is very hypothetical. This is very pie in the sky, just imagining what if. It's basically what if I had the power of the Q and I could snap my fingers and make a TV show pop back into existence. There's no sense of realism involved because I am aware that the vast majority of shows on this list will definitely never ever come back ever. And I am under no delusion about that. I think there's only two exceptions on my list, two shows that maybe possibly, like very slim chance, might come back in some form or another, but probably not. Whereas the other 8 are definitely not, like no way in hell ever gonna come back. But that's not what this list is about. It's about what if I had the power? What if I could snap my fingers and make a TV show exist again? Which ones would I choose? So, now let me talk about shows, because, alright, so I want to get into the thing, because not all shows that stop are canceled, and this is what annoyed me, because when I was watching the show Dark, I heard someone in my work go, "Oh, I heard Dark was canceled," and I was freaked out, because it was before season 3 aired, and I'm like, oh no, they're going to stop it before it gets to finish telling its story. But actually, no. Like, it had already aired, it had already made its third and final season, and the showrunners had decided that they wanted to end the show there. That is not being canceled. I wish people knew the difference between the show deciding to stop, like such as the case of most of the Star Trek shows, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, what else? Game of Thrones, Breaking Bad. All these things were not canceled. The showrunners decided to stop it. So I'm not including those at all. I'm looking at shows that were canceled. That is, the network or the parent company that owns the rights to it told the creatives who were creating the show, you cannot create the show anymore. We do not want to air this show anymore. This show is canceled because we say so, which is a different matter. So, and in many cases, some of these shows lives are cut too short and it shouldn't have ended. Some cases, the show had outlived its welcome and it should have been canceled long ago. Other cases, it wasn't really that big of a deal. I didn't really care if it was canceled. But, so I'm here to talk about 10 shows that I think shouldn't have been canceled and that if I had the magical power, I would bring back. So, let me start with my number 10 on my list, and that is Dark Matter. I didn't think the show was amazing, but it was a fun show, and it was improving. And of course, I have the personal sort of reference of actually having did a live stream with the showrunner, which is the only time I've ever actually got to actually speak to an actual showrunner. And I actually did the stream right after it was canceled and got his thoughts and how disappointed he was. And I was, telling him how disappointed I was because I thought the show was improving and they were definitely setting up for some things in that third season that could have paid off in later seasons. I think this, if I could bring this show back, I most certainly would. The creatives involved definitely had their hearts in it. As I said, it might not have been the best show ever, but it was fun. It was getting better. It was an interesting watch, and the people involved really liked doing it, so I would bring this show back. So, next, we will get into my number 9, which is Firefly. It's a big obligatory. Like, I think any list like this has to have Firefly. Now, it's only number 9 on my list because I'm not that huge of a Firefly fan. In fact, I think the show's a bit overrated, but especially by certain people. I don't think it was the masterpiece a lot of people build it up to be. In fact, I kind of prefer the movie, which was my introduction. The movie came out obviously after the show was canceled, which is not the same thing as what I'm talking about here, is bringing the show back. Now, of course, there's other practical matters instead, like Joss Whedon, which we won't even get into that whole thing. So, and of course, it's been a while, so the cast is a lot older. But I still would bring the show back, maybe under a different showrunner. But I think the main reason why I put this on this list is because it only lasted a season. And we definitely and a lot of it had to do with the mishandling by Fox. Now there was always, like, this is always the show, as I said, like, everyone and their mother wants to bring back, and there's all these teases about this show coming back, but it doesn't look like, as I said, it's not going to happen. But as I said, if I had the magical Q power, definitely would bring this one back. Anyway, let me get into my number 8 on my list, which is Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Now, I know if many people have seen this one, and those who have might not have thought it was that good. The true thing about this show is it had 2 seasons. The first one was kind of mediocre, and the second one actually was pretty good. Like, it got better in the second season. It could have got even better. Had to have a third. And, of course, it ended on an unfortunate cliffhanger, which was a terrible, terrible ending for the show. So that's one of the main reasons why I would bring it back, so they could end the show properly instead of, like, an ending that doesn't actually work. But here's my larger point to Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles. And that is, this is the only good Terminator thing made after Terminator 2 Judgment Day. And you know it. Terminator 3 was, I think, the worst one. Some people apparently try to, in retrospect, excuse it and be like, oh, it wasn't that bad. No, I think it's the worst one. I think it's the worst Terminator movie ever made. Of course, I haven't seen Dark Fate, so I couldn't really say if Dark Fate was worse or not, but after hearing all about it, there's no way I'm wasting my time watching a movie that I know for a fact I would think is crap. And then you got Salvation, which actually I think is not quite as bad as people make it out to be, but it's still not that good. And then Genesis, which was a freaking mess. So no, nothing past Terminator 2 was good except for the Sarah Connor Chronicles. Now, not as good as the first 2 movies, but it doesn't have to be. And it has freaking Lena Headey playing the role of Sarah Connor, and this was pre-Game of Thrones. I would love to see her return to the role. Now, in practicality, the actors have gotten much older, especially the actor who played John Connor. Unless they do a massive time jump, this wouldn't work. But they could just recast John Connor. Or, since this is just a hypothetical anyway, I could say I use my Q-like powers to go back in time and bring this back in the past. Either way, I would bring this show back. So, next on my list, number 7, which is Star Trek Enterprise. Now, again, this gets into the whole time thing, because if it were to come back, it would be more of a revival than a continuation, which I guess isn't exactly the same thing, because the actors have gotten so much older now. They could, since it's set in the past anyway, they could just do a massive time jump and show the various members of the crew of Enterprise on their first creating the Federation and maybe do the Romulan War that they never got to do, but have like maybe Admiral Archer and stuff like that. Or again, I could say this is just another hypothetical time travel situation where I could use my Q-like powers to bring this show back in 2007 instead of, or maybe 2009, where we get this instead of J.J. Abrams shit, which actually, honestly, I'd rather prefer. As much as I rail against the first 2 seasons of Enterprise, and in fact the premise of the show and the cardboard cast of characters, it did get really good in its 3rd and 4th season, right when it got canceled. And its cancellation did have more to do with the inner politics over at Paramount than it had to do with the show itself. I mean, the ratings were hurt by those first 2 seasons. Those first 2 seasons did kill any goodwill that Star Trek fans might have had, and they abandoned it even and missed out on the when it actually started to get good. But yeah, if I could use my time travel powers, which of course I have, well, in this hypothetical scenario I could, then we could get to season 5, because we heard about all the stuff of a season 5. They were planning on doing that's like a prequel to Cloud Miners and the Romulan War, and not the Borg Queen. No, let's not do that. They were planning on doing that, but yeah, to do that. But even if it's like present day and it's a revival and the characters are older, I would take that. Now, you might be like, well, Mark, wouldn't you rather have like a Deep Space Nine or Voyager revival? But yeah, but recall the rules at the top of this video. Those shows were not canceled, so they're not eligible for this list. Oh, yes, you better believe I would much rather have a Deep Space Nine revival than an Enterprise revival, but that does not qualify for this list. For this list, it's only shows that are canceled. Deep Space Nine wasn't. Enterprise was, so it's my number 7. Anyway, so coming in at number 6, Raised by Wolves. This show was canceled earlier this year, or season 2 had aired earlier this year, and right after season 2 had aired, it was canceled. There was a 5-year plan in place, and I'm really disappointed I won't be able to see this 5-year plan carry out to fruition, because I was so confused. And in fact, these first 2 seasons were mostly like setup, especially the second season. You can tell is really building and setting up something which is now never going to happen. Now, the show did get really, really fucking weird and confusing, which perhaps has contributed to why it got canceled. I'm sure the fact that it was really super expensive to make and wasn't that popular also factors. But despite all that, even if they slashed the budget, I would have loved to see it continue, because I wanted to know where the story was heading, and now I will never know. Sad face. So yeah, I used my powers to bring this one back. Alright, so next we will get into my number 5, BoJack Horseman. Now, this is one of the 2 I was referring to where I think there's a tiny bit of a chance that it might actually come back. Mr. BoJack Horseman, there he is. Because I think someone attached to the show mentioned that it's possible, who knows, maybe possibly could come back on Hulu or a different network. But probably not, as I said. Probably not. And the reason, and I love this show so much, it's one of my favorite shows, and I love to see it back. But the reason why it only comes in at number 5 and not higher on the list is because if it did never come back, then it had a happy ending. It had a good ending, and it had a satisfying ending, unlike some of these shows I mentioned previously, like, Sarah Connor Chronicles and Raised by Wolves, which were cut before it could end properly. This one at least did end properly. That being said, they could still do more with the show. And goddamn, I would love to see more BoJack Horseman. God, how much I would love it. And it wouldn't feel like it's overstaying its welcome. I mean, we got, 40 seasons of The Simpsons? That's overstaying its welcome. It's only had 6 seasons. It could go for, Supernatural won for 15, and that show's not even good. It could go longer. It wouldn't be overstaying its welcome. And it hasn't stopped from being fresh, to be honest. And again, they could do a revival. They could take it in new directions. And I was disappointed that they didn't kill off BoJack Horseman at the end of the show. It actually seemed like it would have made way more sense for the story had they killed him off at the end of the show. But if they brought it back, then that would justify them not killing him, because he needs to be alive to come back anyway. So that's my number 5. Next we'll get into my number 4, which is Humans. I was actually really disappointed this show got canceled. This is a show that it was setting up for something. I think it was progressively getting better. Although I will say I had a lot of issues with the 3rd season, which was the last one that aired. It got a bit too fantastical, whatever. But other aspects of it I thought was better than previous seasons, because previous seasons was just a realistic look of human beings using robots as household items who start becoming sentient. But then, and by the time we get to the 3rd season, it's like a whole different class of citizen, as there are a bunch of sentient synths out there, and the society trying to figure out what to do with them, and the hardship and riots. That aspect I really loved. They introduced, as I said, this prophecy fantasy aspect in that season, which I thought was dumb, but I still would have liked to see how it played out. And I definitely think there was definitely more they could have done with this story, and I think it was cut short right when it was getting good. So I very much would like to bring this show back. Alright, so now we'll move over to my number 3, which is the show that I'm sure inspired this list in the first place, as it was just announced to be canceled yesterday by my perspective, and that is Westworld. I'm very upset this is canceled. I've talked about Westworld a lot on my channel, how I have the opposite opinion of most people. Most people think Season 1 was the masterpiece, and the show slowly went downhill until it jumped the shark, where I have the other opinion where I think Season 1 was mediocre at best, and maybe one of the most overrated seasons of television that ever was, but it got progressively better. That Season 2 was better, and Season 3 I think was a masterpiece. Season 3 is one of my favorite seasons of any show ever of all time. Season 4 I was a bit more mixed on than Season 3. I think maybe I like Season 4 just as much, if not better, than Season 2. But it's probably on par, because there's some things about Season 4 I really, really loved, and other things I did not like so much. So it was more of a mixed bag for me. In particular, I did not like how Season 4 ended. Now, you could make the argument that it is a definitive ending, because XX, and now non-spoilers, happens, but it doesn't really explain why non-spoilers happen, and or export delete. I'm not going to say what it is, but if you've seen the show, you know what it is. It doesn't explain why, and then there's a hope that something could continue, and doesn't explain what that means. So it was left too vague of what the hell was actually happening, and I feel like the show absolutely needed another season to justify that ending of Season 4. And now that they won't have one, I'm going to say that's a terrible ending for the show, which is very disappointing. I wish the show would have went out on a stronger note. In fact, had they ended the show after Season 3, I think that would have been a better place to end it. I would have been more happy with the ending of Season 3 than I was with the ending of Season 4. The ending of Season 4, without any follow-up, just comes off as super uber pretentious, and so I think they needed follow up to make it better. And so now we're not going to get any. It's a terrible ending, and that makes me sad. I wish they would have actually, because again, this is another show that had a 5-year plan, and they stopped it 1 year shy of finishing that plan, and that's bullshit. But anywho, yeah, my cat's sad that it ended too. Actually, no, she just wants treats. But either or, let me move over to my number 2. And that's The Expanse. Now, this comes in at number 2 and not number 1 for a couple of reasons. First reason, well, this show was already canceled and brought back. This already happened. And the second reason is this is kind of a cancellation, because here's the thing. When the first time The Expanse was canceled at the end of season 3, the showrunners made it clear this was not the desire, and this was the network's decision, and they wanted to keep the show going. And it was a very, there was a campaign to bring the show back. Everyone was up in arms. But when it was canceled at Amazon, they didn't really refer to it as canceling, and the showrunners seemed to be more okay with it, seemed to imply that it was more of a mutual decision, and more importantly, a lot of people attached with the show and the company that makes the show implies that there could possibly be more in the future. Now, possibly not. So this was the other one I was talking about that could come back. But maybe it won't, because if there is 3 more books that they have yet to adapt. And so they say that there's a possibility in some form or another, maybe TV movies, maybe shortened seasons. I don't know. There's a possibility they could eventually do it, and apparently people involved with the show and the company that makes the show are looking into it, but it could never happen. As I said, I'm not. It's not a sure thing that it's definitely coming back. It could never come back. So if I had my Q-like abilities, I definitely would use them. This would be my second pick to bring it, to make sure it comes back, because there's 3 more novels that need to be adapted. So. To be clear, even though this is my number 2, this is the show I most want to come back. It's just the fact that the ending was kind of amicable, and there's a possibility it could come back, is why it's not my number 1. So, let me get into my number 1, and my number 1 is a show that most certainly, definitely, 100% will not come back, which is why I put it a bit higher than The Expanse, because I need my Q-like abilities in order to bring the show back, where The Expanse, I may not need them. Anyway, my number 1 canceled show that I would bring back is Stargate Universe. It might surprise some people to hear, because I guess I don't talk about it that much on my channel. I did a couple of videos about this. And Stargate Universe is kind of the black sheep of the Stargate family, according to a lot of Stargate fans, because it was a serious departure in tone from the different other Stargate shows. But in my humble opinion, the departure was much for the better. But of course, people weren't used to that tone, and so rejected it as a Battlestar Galactica ripoff, which is absolutely incorrect, because it totally was not a Battlestar Galactica ripoff. Absolutely not. It was a Lost ripoff, very clearly. But anyway, tomatoes. But regardless, I loved Stargate Universe. And again, this had an ongoing story that they were building to that was cut short after 2 seasons. And I think this is the best Stargate show, because I love, even though they did, I'm sorry, but they borrowed, especially season 1, borrowed super heavily from Lost. Super heavily. I'm just amazed anyone can say it's a Battlestar Galactica ripoff without noticing all the Lost parallels slamming you in the face. But it was still like one of the best character story shows I've seen. And I think it's different enough from Lost, the fact it was set in the Stargate universe out in another galaxy, far, far away, made it different enough and unique enough, and the characters were unique enough, and they had all the high drama tension between the characters, and they had the ongoing mysteries the same way Lost did, that I wanted to see resolved. Now, you could say, well, look at how Lost ended and how unsatisfying that it was. Maybe I'm better off not having an ending to all these mysteries, which is fair, but I don't care. If I had my Q powers, I would definitely snap my fingers to bring back Stargate Universe. That would be my first pick. It was the show that got canceled that I was most upset about ever, I think, in my life. Well, other than Expanse, but that came back, as I said. So, yeah, if the Expanse never came back for season 4, 5, and 6, then that would be my number one. But since it did, I'm a bit more satisfied with the Expanse because we did get the bulk of it, and so I'm more happy with the Stargate Universe. After 2 seasons and we didn't get to see how the story resolved, no, that's not okay with me. Absolutely not. And I don't care what anyone says, this is and will always be, even though it only had 2 seasons, the best Stargate show. My humble. Anyway, that is my pick for number 1. So that's it for my top 10 canceled TV shows that I would bring back. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Ricky, for suggesting this video. And thank you for all my Patreons who do support me on my channel. It's definitely very much appreciated. Definitely keeps the channel going and the backbone of Enchantment of Eternity. So let me give a quick shout out to those patrons who do support me. There's Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Avals, Brian A., Alessandro Miguelacio, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, Allison Fordyce, Brandon Howes. Sorry, I almost called you Brendan. Thank you so much for your support. Very much appreciate it. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon as well, there's a link in the description below. $10 or more, you can request videos like this. But even if you can donate less, you still get perks like pre-releases of videos and my patron-only series. So thank you so much, and for even if you're not can't support me on Patreon, just for liking and subscribing, still a great way to help the channel. And be sure to keep up with my channel as I do much more reviews at the moment, covering lots of Star Trek, doing the original series Prodigy, and many more shows to come. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.